Hello, everyone. My name is Mason Brown, and I am one of the admission counselors at Rhodes. I'm also a Rhodes graduate, so I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit today about my alma mater and what we've been doing to kind of combat what's going on in the world these days, or rather kind of adjust to this new normal, quote unquote. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about ways to make the most of your virtual visit. So let's be honest, no one wants to be in this position where we're having to make these kinds of presentations. We on the college side share you all's disappointment and anxiety about what the future may or may not hold for high school students. But this new landscape is not just a Rhodes problem, and it's not just a problem at your high school. I know it may not be much of a consolation, but every high school student in America right now is experiencing similar anxiety and disappointment about this new normal and how it affects the college search. So know that we as college representatives are really in this together with you all. And I think you can experience a lot of grace, understanding, and flexibility as we move forward, both on the high school side and the college side, since this is kind of uncharted territory for everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen with you all. And hopefully you can see it. Cool. So today, like I said, we'll be talking about making the most of your virtual visit. So still getting a lot out of a campus visit, even if you're doing it from the comfort of your own home. So first and foremost, why is a campus visit even important? Maybe you're thinking, we'll just go ahead and skip that part of the search since that's not really an option these days. Well, a campus visit, even if it is virtual, is still important for two reasons. The first is to demonstrate your interest in that college. Demonstrated interest is an admission term, but it basically is what it sounds like. And that means that especially at smaller private schools like Rhodes, they really take this into account. And that basically, it is what it sounds like. We really only want to admit students who have shown that they may end up being a student in our school, or they're at least interested in applying or enrolling in our school in the future, right? We don't want to admit students who just apply because it's free and it's on the Common App or something along those lines. So in the past, demonstrated interest could be shown, at least at Rhodes, by doing things like, of course, visiting campus, but also coming to see us at a college fair, coming to talk to us if we visited your high school, chatting with us off campus at a coffee shop or something like that, talking with coaches, anything along those lines can demonstrate your interest in a school. Of course, a lot of these traditional ways of showing your interest are not really options at this point in time. So colleges are really going to have to make changes and ease up on what we would normally deem as demonstrated interest. So my advice to you all as you continue your college search is to ask colleges how they are handling demonstrated interest, if that's even something that is important to them. And if so, how they will be measuring interest moving forward. You may need to demonstrate interest in a virtual way, or they may be kind of tossing that out altogether. And of course, the idea of doing a campus visit is to make sure that you can actually picture yourself on that campus. It may be a good way to kind of cross some colleges off your list, but also a good way of zeroing in on schools that you can actually see yourself being a part of. So obviously visiting a campus has typically been the best way to get a sense of the school in the past. So there's definitely been almost like a sense of loss since that has been taken away. However, we are going to talk about ways that you can still get to know a college, even if it's from the comfort of your own home. So let's move on to the next slide. So in the vein of, or in the spirit of remaining positive amongst all of these changes these days, let's talk about opportunities that you all have now that much of the world of higher ed has had to move to an online format. So these are all things that may or may not have been available in the past at a lot of schools, but now because you're not able to do a lot of these things in person, schools are having to get creative and produce a lot of virtual content. So these are all new opportunities that you will have as high school students to get to know a college better. So first and foremost is a virtual tour. Now, I know a virtual tour sounds kind of strange. Like, how can you get a good sense of a school if you're not able to actually put your feet on that campus? But there are lots of upsides to doing a virtual tour. First of all, they are free, and they don't require that you take time off of school or that your family take time off of work. Colleges have had to invest a lot into their virtual content these days, especially their campus tours. I know for Rhodes, we were working on putting a virtual tour on the website. It was taking some time, but when the pandemic hit, we really had to move quickly to do that. So schools are now offering things like 360-degree view maps, fancy cameras and equipment are being used, Schools are utilizing things like virtual reality. So a lot of cool ways that you can still get a pretty good idea of the campus without having to leave the comfort of your own home. And this is especially useful maybe just to get a good idea of a school that is really, really far away. Because I know it can often be frustrating if you travel across the country to visit a school that you think you're interested in, and then you get there and it's still helpful knowing that you can cross it off the list, but sometimes it does feel like almost a waste of time and resources when you travel so far to a school and realize it's just not really a good fit, right? So some tours, virtual tours, are being given by real life students in kind of a live format, almost like they're kind of clicking you through a map. That's how we do our virtual tours. So sometimes those can be a little bit clunkier, but the nice thing is that they are live, so you can ask your questions real time to real students. And then other virtual tours are kind of pre-recorded, really well-produced pieces that communications departments are doing. The downside to that is that they're likely not going to have someone that you can ask questions to live, but you can always follow up with the admission department, probably schedule a meeting with the current student or something along those lines. And last but not least, virtual tours have, like I said, not really been an option until this time. So I work with students that attend high school in Tennessee, but also California. And so this gives those students an opportunity to get a good sense of roads before they actually decide to spend the time and resources to actually come to campus. The second opportunity that you all have in this new landscape is you have never had more access to a campus community than you have now, or at least that's definitely the case at Rhodes. So you all now have an incredible amount of access to our campus community members, like our current students, faculty, staff, coaches. When we say staff, we mean, of course, our office, but also offices like career services, study abroad, things like that. When we are typically hosting an on-campus tour, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people that have different schedules. We're trying to get people in the right place at the right time. So we are not able to schedule as many meetings with sort of these outside departments like we can when everyone's at their computers and it's just as simple as clicking a link. So you really do have the opportunity now to talk with offices like career services and study abroad, accessibility services, things that you may not have been able to do in the past at Rhodes and at other schools as well. And this really allows you to make an authentic connection and tailor your virtual visit to your interests and your priorities. And again, you can all do this all from the comfort of your dining room table or your kitchen table. Of course, attending a class is often a thing that you can do on campus at many colleges, and that might not seem like it's an option at all anymore. But the upside to kind of this new landscape, I know I keep using that terminology, but this new world that we're living in is, especially at places like Rhodes, a lot of smaller private schools, not only do we have smaller class sizes in terms of the numbers of students that are in them, but they're also smaller physically, smaller spaces, right? Our average class size is about 14 students. So when it's a typical on-campus visit, we can only send maybe 1 or 2 students, high school students that are touring Rhodes, to go and sit in on that class, or maybe none at all if they don't have any room in that class. But when classes are taught online via Zoom or some other type of format, we can really send students, or as many high school prospective students as we want, to those classes. Now, some colleges in the fall will be totally back in the class. Some will be doing sort of like a hybrid model, and some may be totally remote and doing learning via Zoom. And so I would check with the admission office when you schedule a visit, or if you're interested in scheduling a visit, and say, hey, are you guys remote? Are you, on campus? I think colleges are going to have to kind of make a lot of adjustments for this fall. We are planning to go back full force in a traditional classroom environment, at least for the beginning of the fall. But we're not sure how to deal with kind of outside visitors to those classrooms. So I think it's going to depend a lot on the college. But I know personally with Rhodes, we've recorded a lot of the Zoom classes that took place this past semester. So a lot of schools may have pre-recorded classes so you can kind of watch on your own time to get a good sense of, wow, the professor actually knows the students in the class. And even though it's a bunch of faces in square boxes, they still know each other, and there's a strong connection there, and it's more of a discussion-based class. So anyway, attending a class, yes, may seem like it's only possible to do when you're actually on campus, but now, especially for a lot of smaller private schools like Rhodes, you can actually attend those classes via Zoom. Now, virtual campus programs. So a campus program is anything like an open house, an accepted students day, some sort of admission event. a lot of colleges have had to get really creative for the past couple months with how to continue to host these programs because we are still recruiting incoming classes. I know Rhodes had to make a lot of quick adjustments. We did a couple accepted student stays via Zoom and things like that, and they actually went pretty well. So the upside to virtual campus programs is they are a great place to kind of kick off your college search. They allow you to be a little bit more passive and just learn, which, like I said, is great if you're just kind of starting the search. Whereas when you schedule an individual meeting with an admission counselor or a student, it's obviously going to be one-on-one, and you're going to be expected to ask a lot of questions. And the nice thing about a lot of these campus programs taking place online is typically at an on-campus program, the admission staff and students will constantly be asking visitors, you know, if you have any questions, what kind of questions do you have for our admission staff or our student panelists, things like that. But when it's online, you know, like a Zoom webinar like we've been doing, you can just type your questions into the Q&A box, and it gives you a little bit more of a sense of, you know, being anonymous rather than having to raise your hand in front of a huge crowd. So that's kind of an upside to virtual campus programs. And again, they're a great place to start if you just kind of want to take it all in, take some notes, and be more of like a passive guest. Virtual college fairs is another new opportunity that you all have as high school students. Now, again, this may sound a little bit strange, but I've taken part in a few virtual college fairs so far, and they're actually really interesting. I think they can actually be a little bit more efficient than traditional in-person college fairs because sometimes, you know, if you've been to a college fair before, you're in an auditorium, you're looking around trying to find the booth, or you're just wandering around trying to find a booth that you're interested in talking to. You may have to wait in line, and then you get to the front of the line, there are people behind you, so you just have to ask one question and move it along. So it can sometimes take up a lot of time, but not really be that efficient. Online college fairs typically look like you can choose from a list of schools, click on the school's page. They have some basic information about the school, maybe some videos and photos. And then typically there's a chat box where you can chat with an admission representative or a current student or something along those lines. So I think it's a little bit more efficient than a traditional college fair. So I hope that virtual college fairs are actually here to stay, regardless of, you know, whether or not we're in a pandemic, because they've actually been pretty helpful. The other good thing is a lot of times, so for example, my students in Tennessee, it might be harder for colleges in California to come visit high schools in Tennessee to go to their college fairs. So now you have more access to more colleges at these virtual college fairs, which is pretty cool. I put alumni from your school on here, and that's not necessarily a new virtual resource that you have, but I just want to remind you all that that is always a fantastic resource to reach out to students who have gone to your high school or who you know from your hometown, who have gone to that college that you're interested in, because especially if, you know, they're not a tour guide, they're not an admission representative, their stories are so authentic, that's always such a good place to start. So don't forget about utilizing alumni from your school or from your hometown. And then last but not least, kind of an upside to this new landscape or new world that we're living in, is you all have never had so much time to tackle the college search. So for once, you're probably not worried about how am I going to balance my sports, my after school activities, theater, volunteering, along with, you know, these rigorous courses that I'm taking, but also family responsibilities, but also doing the college search. Typically you'd have to make plans to take off of school, and your parents would have to make plans to take off of work to travel to these colleges. But now the college search can really come to you all. So you can really utilize a lot of this extra time that you all have to do a much more thorough college search than you probably could have before when you were trying to balance all these activities on top of school. At the same time, while this newfound time allows for you to do a more thorough college search, we recognize that you may be a little less motivated than usual, and probably a little burnt out on Zoom calls. I know we've been working via Zoom since mid-March, and it can get a little bit tedious to be on Zoom all day and at your desk all day. So we understand that just because you have a little bit more free time doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to spend every waking moment working on the college search. But, you know, there are a lot of downsides to what's happening in the world right now, but an upside is that you could have a little bit more time to spare on the college search. So that's that. I want to impart some tips and tricks that I have as it pertains to the college search and kind of this new world that we're living in. So for example, I have kind of 4 big ones. First and foremost, whether or not a college specifies this, or if they don't specify this, be prepared to turn your camera on if you have a camera enabled computer or phone or whatever you're calling in from. So if you set up, a virtual tour, a virtual visit, a virtual meeting of some sort, and they don't specify you're going to have your camera on, just assume that they want you to have your camera on. We definitely prefer that if it's a possibility, because it just feels a little bit more like you're having an actual conversation. It feels a little bit more authentic, a little less awkward than us just seeing ourselves talking to a black box with our name in it. So if you're able to, be prepared to have your camera turned on. And that also means, of course, that you don't have to be dressed in a suit and tie, but be appropriately dressed in an appropriate area of your house with decent internet if possible, things like that. So turn your camera on if you're able to. Number 2, treat virtual appointments and interviews like you would treat in-person appointments, right? If you have an in-person interview, you wouldn't just stand up that interview, right, without saying anything. I think this has been increasingly easy to do since this is, standing up an appointment is as easy as just not clicking on the link. But, although we are doing a lot of these interviews and appointments virtually, we're still taking time out of our day to meet with students and their families. So if you can't make it, if something comes up, we understand things happen. Just let the admission counselor or representative know that you won't be making it. But when we schedule something, we expect you to show up unless we hear otherwise. So, and that also reflects negatively on you when it comes to the actual application process, right? We take note of who does and doesn't show up to their appointments. So treat virtual appointments and interviews like you would treat in-person appointments. Number 3, I would really recommend scheduling multiple meetings with different current students at that school. So for example, at Rhodes, you can just simply go on our website and say, I'd like to talk to a current student. That's the case at a lot of schools these days. And you might want to chat with 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 current students at the same school and ask them the same questions. I know it's really easy, at least in my experience, if you get a tour guide that you just don't mesh well with, you think, everyone at that school thinks the same way, has the same opinion, does the same thing. And that's of course not true. There's no campus on this country that has just one type of person. So I think it's really important to ask the same questions of multiple people to get different responses and opinions and perspectives. Last but not least, it is just increasingly more important to stay organized in this world where you are getting just an influx of emails and text messages and just virtual content, not only from your high school, but especially from colleges. Colleges have definitely been moving towards more virtual communication over the years, and that has definitely been expedited with what's going on in the world these days. So I wanted to give you all a few kind of tips for staying organized with all of this virtual content coming your way from colleges. So 3 things that I would recommend to you all. These are 3 things that I kind of wish that I had known as a high school student or done as a high school student. So I'm passing them along to you guys. One thing that I've seen more and more over the past couple of years is families creating a family Gmail account or a family email account. So something like Johnson Family College at gmail.com or Sally's College Search at gmail.com. That way you're able to separate your school emails and your college emails, which means that you can also choose when you want to tackle the college search instead of emails from Rhodes or whatever popping up while you're working on your calculus homework. That can be a little bit overwhelming and distracting sometimes. Number 2, if you're lacking motivation, like a lot of us are these days since we're constantly sitting and on our computers and on Zoom, schedule a time to deal with the college search, whether that's individually or with your family. I know my sister, for example, set this up with our parents. Back in the day, the college search was something that really stressed her out. And so she said, I would just like to talk about it from 7 to 9 on Sundays. After that, don't ask me about the college search. I don't want to talk about it. 7 to 9 on Sundays. That's when we can discuss college. And that worked out really well for her. And last but not least, I would highly recommend, and I know this doesn't sound ideal on top of all the other work that you're probably doing for school, and it may sound a little bit overboard or a little bit nerdy, but I would highly recommend keeping college spreadsheets. So these days you'll be Zooming all over the place and potentially meeting with lots of different representatives at the same school. It's a lot easier to remember what you did on what campus visit when you can remember the car ride there or staying overnight in a hotel in downtown Memphis and going out to eat. You can kind of piece those memories together a little bit easier when you're actually doing it in person. But when you're just constantly clicking on links and Zooming from home, it's hard to remember if that woman that you met with in the black shirt was with Rhodes or with another school. and that sort of thing. So I have two spreadsheets that I'm happy to send out to anyone who wants them. I'm going to unshare my screen and reshare it so that you all can see. This first one is more of kind of a general college spreadsheet that honestly I just pulled off the internet, and I should have cited my source, but I didn't. We have college 1, 2, 3 through 10. This is just an arbitrary number. And it's just basic stuff that people have been using for a long time, making sure that you can kind of compare and contrast location, type of school, the different deadlines that they have, costs, and just kind of basic information like that. So that's something that I would recommend to any student, regardless of whether or not we're in a pandemic. But this is something that I made especially for virtual visits. So let's look at that. So this is a spreadsheet that I would recommend using specifically for this kind of new environment when you're doing a lot of the college search online, just to keep track of who you've already talked to, who you haven't, and what you've done where. So for example, you can put an X if you've talked to the admission representative at college number 1. And then when you've done that, maybe talk to a student, and things like that. Keeping track of where you've done a virtual campus tour, attended campus programs. The national decision deadline is May 1st. And so this will definitely come in handy if you are still undecided in April and are trying to compare and contrast and figure out, well, I went to the open house at Rhodes in October, but it's been since October since I even thought about Rhodes, so let's maybe talk to a current student or something like that. So this kind of spreadsheet can definitely maybe help you stay a little bit more organized as you navigate kind of the virtual campus visit. Let me go back to my presentation. Okay. Save. Okay. So those are some of my tips for the college search as we kind of navigate these new waters. I want to leave time for questions, and it looks like we have one question from a family or a student who is asking, is there anything new that we need to be doing for online interviews or individual meetings? And that's a good question. So anything new that you need to be doing now that interviews and meetings have moved kind of online. I don't think there's a ton different that you need to do now that things have kind of moved online, other than definitely make sure to show up to your interview if you have an online interview. Aside from that, of course, again, like I said, we don't expect you to be dressed in a suit and tie when you meet with admission representatives in person or online, but make sure, even if you're going a little bit more casual, make sure it's still an appropriate outfit. Make sure the background is, appropriate. You're in a space with good Wi-Fi, like I said. But also, just like with an in-person interview, I would recommend coming with questions. You never want to go into any sort of meeting or interview blind. It should not end up being the admission counselor just, doing an information session for you at the coffee shop. You should come into the interview with a little bit of contextual knowledge about that school. So basic stuff like where it is, what types of programs they have, the size of the school, maybe some deadlines that are coming up, just so that, you don't sit down and ask, well, tell me all about your nursing school when the school doesn't have a nursing school, if that makes sense. Other than that, I don't think there's anything major that would be a huge difference between an online meeting and an in-person meeting, but that's a good question. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box, so hopefully this was helpful to you all. If you do have any other questions, my information is listed on the slideshow, but you can also contact your specific admission officer at Rhodes. If you go to our website, just rhodes.edu, and you go to the virtual visit page, there is a button that says Connect with Us. That'll show you a map of the country, and based on that, it'll tell you who works with students from your part of the country. So you can ask that admission counselor more specific questions about Rhodes, or just general stuff about what are your thoughts on this type of thing in this new environment that we're living in. So before I let you all go, just to reiterate, we know this is an awful situation that you all are in. This is not a spot that we want to be in any way. No one's denying that this is not an ideal situation, right? there's a lot of unknown in the world, and a lot of you all's plans are up in the air. However, as it relates to the college search, hopefully through this presentation, you've been able to see that there are actually a ton of opportunities available to you all that you never had last year because of all this new virtual content that's been coming out. So although this pandemic is obviously awful, it's created a need for a lot of these new resources, which has made colleges a lot more accessible than they ever have been, I think. So my advice to you all, stay positive. I think this generation of high school students will be way more resilient and tougher than any high school students that have come before them. So stay positive, you can do it. Enjoy the rest of your summer or the rest of your year, depending on when you're watching this. And we hope to be able to welcome you all to our campus in the near future. Bye.